podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck. So as I often do at the start of a podcast, I will share some things that are going on in my household. But this past week has been, of all the tales that I tell, this one, I think for those of us who are parents, are going to feel, I think, deeply. So I've mentioned before, I have 3 kids. I have 2 boys and a girl. My girl's in the middle. I've also mentioned that our vacation this year was not going to be something, particularly super cool and fun. And I shared that story, which was going out to, visit my wife's family out in, Nebraska. Not exactly what you would call a great summer joint, It's not like by the ocean or by the lake or anything like that. So, it was going to be kind of limited, and it's just been financially a tough year. And I think for many, that's been the case. So nevertheless, my daughter has a best friend, as most kids do. And this is a best friend that she first met in nursery school. Very first day of nursery school, my daughter is feeling nervous, concerned, right? Just a little anxiety. She's leaving, her parents for this much bigger place. It's this big place, bunch of kids, strangers. Yeah, you do the drop-in earlier. You kind of get to meet everyone, and maybe they do like a drop-in day where you kind of test the waters a little bit. But this is different. This is okay. You're a big girl now. You're going to nursery school. And my daughter was just having a hard time like many kids do. And this other little girl comes over and takes her hand in hers and leads her in. And off they go. Right? And they've been, as often is the case, on and off friends because sometimes they're in different classes and those kind of things. And by middle school, though, they'd really come back together. Really, really tight. And they've remained really tight. And even last year, they're in high school. They're at another, a cafeteria table with another pair of best friends. And one of the other girls goes, wow, you guys are like best friends. Like, you guys are like real friends. Like, you're close. She has no offense to her best friend, but like, you guys are legit. Right? And when other people can recognize the strength of a friendship, that's a good relationship. Right? So she, the girl, the best friend, is a only child. And, last year they had talked about kind of this elaborate trip, and they were going to invite my daughter along to go with them, right? Because it's boring for a teenage girl just to go to someplace, even if it's a gorgeous place, some tropical place. It's still with mom and dad. And, it's kind of cool to have someone your own age, particularly your best friend. But last year fell through. They ended up having something happen to their house and, the things that happen in life. So this year, they decided that they were going to, once again, try to have this vacation. And they've been planning it for a little while now. And it finally got down to crunch time, and they'd finally found a place. And they are going to Hawaii. Awesome. It's a U.S. state, so even though you're off the mainland, it's the U.S., right? So a little bit less concerning for, like they had talked about going to Aruba. There are stories out of Aruba that if you are a parent of a teenage girl, I had a lot of anxiety about the possibility of that trip. I'll be honest. So, great. They're going to go. We did all the paperwork and everything together. And, we're, the 11th hour. They send us a link to the resort that they're staying at. And it's awesome. And off they go. Now, admittedly, I'm not a helicopter parent. But I'm relatively strict-ish. My kids will probably say that I'm a mixture of either completely too lackadaisical or completely overbearing. Depends on the day, depends on the reason. But anyway, off they go. And I admit to having some nerves. I give her like the biggest hug before she leaves, and off they go. And, long flights and, I'm checking in, and we use location services here. Make sure that we know, where everyone is. Not meant to be obtrusive, but it's trust but verify kind of thing. You tell me you're going to be someplace, you're actually there. Not that I didn't get in trouble exactly where I told my parents we're going to be, I'm going to be over at so-and-so's house. Still get in trouble. But still, you want some verification that they are where they say they're going to be, right? So it's great to have these location services. So first they get there, they fly into Honolulu, and then they're going to have a connection, and they're going to go, and you're probably already thinking, wait a minute, where's this story going? So yes, they are going to be flying to one of the other islands. Now, bear in mind, up until very recently, past week, I didn't know a ton about Hawaii. Really didn't. I know it's a state. I know it's a series of islands. I've had some, friendships and relationships that have some, link to the islands, but I don't know a ton about it, admittedly. So they get there, and, again, there's location services. Oh, she's on the next island. Of course, the island of Maui. Okay. I don't know anything about Maui other than I hear it's picturesque. It's beautiful. I remember having a boss transferring there because this is the place to be. And they send us pictures of the resort and everything's great. Now, of course, very first day, teenage girl decides that she is not going to wear the water shoes that we bought for her. They're cute. Trust me. Exactly what she was looking for. Goes into the water, cuts her foot on a rock. Brutal cut, by the way. Total flap of skin off. Of course, I'm thinking, great. She's going to get her foot infected because she's going to continue to be doing whatever it is they're doing. And you're on vacation, you're walking around, you're doing different things. She's going to get an infected foot. Going to have to get her foot cut off, right? So let's see. That was, if I do the timeline here. So they got in. So let's see. Their first day there was on Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday. So Wednesday they get in, get settled, all that, whatever. Next day, what's the next day? It's all a blur at this point, but, yeah, so they get in on Tuesday. Okay. And, somewhere later in the evening, I'm checking the location services, and at some point, let's see, yeah, so Tuesday night, I go to bed, and the location services hadn't updated in a little while, a couple hours. I'm figuring to myself, teenage girl forgot to charge her phone, and she's probably on Snapchat the whole time, even though they're on vacation. So, go to bed, okay. I asked my wife, if you talked to her, yeah, a little while ago, whatever. I'm like, okay, go to bed. I wake up next morning, of course, check my phone. Still no update. So there's also a time differential. I'm like, okay, maybe the phone's charging, whatever. But you have to understand that I keep checking my phone, and it's 12 hours since last update, 13 hours since last update, 14 hours since last update, so on. Right? Now, in my line of business, there is an annual audit. The annual audit is stressful for me in the job that I do. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So I have to get into work. When I get there, the auditor's there. I greet them, so every morning there's kind of like a debrief, a conversation that you have about like what the things you're going to cover in the day. So that's my focus. Okay. So by the time I get back into my office, get set up, sit down, look at the location services, I forget what it was up to at this point, 18 hours or something. I don't know. And I open up the news just to check on the news. And I see Maui fires, the Maui wildfires. Now, I told you I don't really know much about Hawaii. I don't know the geography, really anything. But I'm reading this article, and I go, wait a minute. That Lahaina. And I look at my phone, and sure enough, it says location Lahaina. So you can imagine my heart sank at that point because I haven't gotten a hit on her phone in now like a day, and location services say Lahaina. So of course, my brain says to me, the reason that your little girl is not answering her phone is because to escape being on fire, she jumped into the ocean and is now God knows where. And it was the most terrifying feeling that I can possibly express. And I think in the back of my head, there's this understanding that I'm having. I'm like, no, she's still alive. She's still alive. I know that, right? I know that, but I don't know that. Not confirmed, not independently. I don't know that. I haven't seen her. I haven't heard her. I haven't talked to her. I haven't texted her, nothing. And I'm starting to lose it a little bit. But again, I have this like, no. I have this feeling. She's alive, but I don't know that she's okay. I don't know that she's safe, injured. I don't know if they're still in harm's way. I don't know any of this. So text my wife. I'm like, look, here's the situation. I don't know if you've read the news, and she's also had a busy week. She's changing companies. It's like a whole thing, right? So we're very stressed. And now we don't know where our daughter is. So I text family, kind of let them know, hey, here's the deal. We don't know anything. Say your prayers. We need them. And then I'm like, you know what? One of my very best friends. So I'm a weirdo. I had a female best man at my wedding. One of my longest, closest, dearest friends. That's Nicole. She's been on the show. Go check out the record rumble of Faith No More, The Real Thing versus Angel Dust. Her husband is from Hawaii. So I'm like, look, hey, do you got a couple minutes? And she's like, sure. And she gets on the phone. It's like, I don't know, 9 o'clock there or something like that. Not too bad. They're out in California. Anyway. And like, here's the situation. And she goes, oh. Okay, send me resort information, anything that you have. I'll talk to my in-laws. We'll see what we can do, mobilize some people that we know and try to get some information. So she checks. She goes, look, their actual resort, the location services do say Lahaina. They're a little bit north of that, about 5 miles north. Okay. Doesn't mean much to me at this point because it's spreading. Right? It's not contained, or at least it seemed like it's spreading, and there's multiple fires, right? And I don't know anything. It's like, so I would think they're okay, unless they kind of went into the old town, which is possible, but we're going to see what we can do. Cell towers are down. Okay, cell towers are down. Makes perfect sense. I thought that maybe that was part of the situation. So probably within about a half an hour of those calls and texts with family and friends, I get a phone call from my daughter who says, Mom says that I should call you. And I will admit, I got very choked up in that moment. And I'm not often speechless. I can do a podcast by myself most weeks and just talk for, an hour. I was just overcome with just emotion of knowing, okay, she's alive. Where are you? They evacuated us. We're at this place, whatever. Of course, I go and I pull up like the location of where she is. And it's like literally like an industrial park out in the middle of nowhere, but she's safe. It's like we have water and a bathroom. It's great. I don't care if she sleeps on a cot. She's away from there. Right. And then, we start trying to get, information and trying to be helpful without being obtrusive, letting the family that she's with kind of figure out what they need to do. And, it was. So for my family and my friends are like, what, dude, it's been like a half an hour. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You have only known for a half an hour. I have been dealing with this for hours now of not being able to locate her. So, they did, get back to their resort briefly, basically just to get their stuff and leave. Later that evening, as you can imagine, she's a teenager. She's very emotional and she just wants to come home. And as she puts it, she's like, it's different for them. Like, yes, I'm a part of their family, but if this goes sideways, they're together. You know what I mean? Mother, father, daughter, they're together. They perish together. And she felt like she was just on her own. As much as they consider her one of their own, it's not the same. She wanted to be with her family. And I wanted her home. I did. I wanted her home. So, various different roadblocks and different, a lot of different stuff that happened. And I could get into all that. But really what it comes down to is they finally got the go ahead to leave the area. There was a certain highway. So basically you can go north, you can go northeast and then have to come southeast down, right? But that goes through jungle, narrow roads, and there was no gas available because there's fires. Things are closed. Literally, residents have lost their homes. It's like a mess. They had like 3/4 of a tank or whatever. And it's a rental. And I'm like, gosh, just ditch the rental and just like take the shuttle buses that they're running, whatever. Like, please just get back home. So they make it to the airport. They have their first warm meal in quite some time. I guess it's been about a day since they'd had a warm meal. And they're like, well, we could fly you places. Basically, they're like, okay, you got to get to Honolulu first, and then you go from there. And the best they could do was we can maybe get you to San Francisco, but we don't know when we can get you a connecting flight to Boston. We can get you to Vegas, but again, we don't know if we can get you back home to Boston anytime soon. So basically, they ended up finding a place in Honolulu, and it's this beautiful place, and they got to swim with dolphins, and it's a vacation again. As much as I would like her home yesterday, the fact that she's getting to have these experiences after being probably about as scared as she's ever been, thousands of miles away from her family, in a situation where people within 13 minutes, I think is what it is. Massive loss of life. Massive loss of life. And on their drive down, they saw some of the devastation. And I think it was sobering for everyone. Excuse me. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it was so nerve-wracking. And something I hope no parent has to even feel for a minute, because I can only imagine any of you who have actually experienced loss. Like, even what I was thinking about, the things in my head were bringing tears to my eyes, much less the actual experience, much less what the people of Maui have lost. The people of Lahaina have lost. It's awful. It's terrible. I personally am extremely grateful and feeling blessed that my daughter is going to be home soon. But she's not here yet. And until I see her, my eyes on her, she's in my arms, I just need her home. I just need her home. So continued prayers for the people of Maui, of Lahaina town. And they need it. They need it. You know? Part of the reason I was just get out of there is just even for the residents. We don't need any, tourists, get the hell out of there. You need local resources for these people. Excuse me, the resorts, the hotels, all of it needs to be for the people that need it most. So that was this past week. All that happened since this, the Yacht Rock episode dropped last Wednesday. That was the same day that all this information, all these things happened. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So then tomorrow, when this episode drops, my firstborn, my baby boy, is going to be 18 years old. That in and of itself is blowing my mind because just yesterday he was a little baby in my arms. I was cutting his umbilical cord. And he's, a legal adult. He's going to vote in an election. He's going to be in college. Yeah. It's crazy. A lot of emotions. So tomorrow morning, thankfully, I don't have to go into work right away because we're running emergency testing on the alarms. So you don't want to be there during the alarm testing. It's awful. So we're going to celebrate in the morning, and his sister is going to be missing his birthday. She did say she felt really bad about that, but hey, what are you going to do? It is what it is. So what are we going to talk about tonight? So I don't know how my brain came up with this particular topic this week, because I realized that in a way, it's almost analogous of what happens in post-traumatic situations. And that's how we kind of overcome, how we react. Or, I have a tattoo of a phoenix on my arm. It's how we rise from the ashes. Now, I didn't think of rise from the ashes in the context of the fires until I started doing my notes for the night. And I went, well, I guess it's apropos a little bit. How do we overcome major losses? But how have bands, so it's not just bands that have had losses, but how have bands kind of broken up for whatever reason and then either had even greater heights after this traumatic event or a breakup or whatever it is? So that's what this is about. It's bands that have risen out of other bands. And there's some good ones. So just a couple minor notes. There are a couple of supergroups. I can say, well, that's not quite fair. And I thought about disqualifying them, but a couple of them I think make a lot of sense. Kind of how they really, it's the number of members of a band. If you have two or more members of a particular band, a successful band at that, who then go on to form another either equally or greater success band, I kind of have them on the list. There's also just some guys who can just be successful over and over again in various different bands. Some of them a little bit less, I think, mainstream, admittedly, but let's start right off the bat. So, Joy Division, formed in 1976. Now, I've only had their, technically they only made two records, but I think they put them both together into one record. But in 1976, they ran until 1980, until the death of lead singer Ian Curtis at the age of 23 years old. 23. So, of course, you have a band that had just completed their first U.S. tour. We're on the precipice, really, of going beyond just British fame into worldwide fame. And you can, find out the story of Ian Curtis by yourself, and I will do an episode somewhere down the road about them. Because once I was turned on to Joy Division, it's stunning. It's gorgeous. It sounds like nothing else, but it also begat so many, like a influence to so many. Still got this cough, guys. Okay, so Bernard Sumner, Peter Hook, Stephen Morris, we're not done yet. We still want to create music. Ian's gone, but we still want to do this, but we can't be Joy Division. So, 1981, New Order was born. New Order went on to become a huge band. Maybe not everywhere in the world, but, they certainly were like the darlings of 120 minutes in alternative radio. Certainly every college kid was listening to New Order during that time period. So, number one, Joy Division brings you New Order. Now, that's a little bit before my time. My time, we had Mother Love Bone. Now, Mother Love Bone begat a couple of things. One as a tribute, the other as a whole new entity that would go on to become one of the biggest bands of all time. So Mother Love Bone ran from 1988 to 1990. What a weird mix of West Coast glam in the Elton John vein with what was early grunge. A sound and a look like no one else. Very young. Stone Gossard had only been playing guitar for a few years at that point when they got started. But again, in 1990, with the death of Andrew Wood at the age of 24 years old. Heroin. Andrew Wood was so interesting because he clearly leaned in to all of the trappings of the glam rock stuff, but also bringing that piano element. I mean, there's only one band I can think of kind of in that vein at that time where it's like this little bit of, you don't normally think of punk rock and piano, for example, right? But there's elements of punk rock and garage rock and punk rock and just something totally unique about Mother Love Bone. And, being a fan of a band like Faith No More, for example, I kind of like a whiny singer. I also like, Take Me Down from Faster Pussycat, right? So Andrew Wood is somewhere in this weird mix of Take Me Down and Mike Patton, just, Elton John. Just a weird mix up. But of course, as you've heard me say before, I can't stand Pearl Jam. And Pearl Jam, of course, rose from the ashes of Mother Love Bone with Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament. Say, hey, we still want to do this. And they get Mike McCready, and some guy named Eddie Vedder. And the way that I look at it, Eddie Vedder inherited the fame that Andrew Wood would have and maybe should have received. I can't make excuses for drug use going ahead and wiping out a talent so young. But when you listen to the arrangements in Pearl Jam and you listen to Mother Love Bone, it's all there. You can hear it, particularly in Jeff Ament's bass playing. That was what should have been Andrew Wood's career. I don't know if they would have made it to the same level. I really don't. But of course, Temple the Dog was another project, a mixture of Soundgarden and Pearl Jam as a tribute to Andrew Wood, and a great record all by itself with Temple the Dog. And if you want to ask me what would be a song that represents the 90s, Hunger Strike is the 90s to me. the perfect song for the 90s. And of course, this one, some might say, well, the really two members? Yes. And I'll explain. So, of course, the band that launched grunge into the stratosphere, formed in 1987, Nirvana. From 1987 to 1994, they became the biggest band on the planet other than like Metallica and Guns N' Roses. Like they were like the three top rock acts, period. And it came to an end with the 1994 suicide of Kurt Cobain at age 27. Think about this. 23, 24, 27. Far too young. Yet with these legacies that they left behind. So, of course, Dave Grohl had been demoing stuff for a long time. Got the offer to join Tom Petty's band, chose not to, wanted to do his own thing. So you can say, well, all those demos, that first Foo Fighters record, of course I'm talking about Foo Fighters, was done primarily just Dave. However, for it to be a band, he needed a band. And another member of Nirvana, Pat Smear. So in my estimation, you got two members. Foo Fighters was directly begotten out of Nirvana. So I've just thrown in a cough drop. So I apologize if you hear it click against my teeth, but I've never tried it before. While I'm on the podcast, gonna give it a shot. I threw in a Ricola. So anyway, Nirvana, Foo Fighters, gotta put them together. I don't see how you can avoid it. So those are the three that immediately came to mind as far as losing a key member. And instead of just folding it up, started a whole new entity. Now, there's plenty of bands where the band just broke up for whatever reason. Whether it's personalities, whether they didn't really get to that next level. Some of them become kind of like these cult legends, but never really make it mainstream. So then band, members will split off, and then whatever it is, the next phase is the true breakthrough. So there's a little band that if you're into ska music, you've heard of Operation Ivy, formed in 1987 and only ran for 2 years. Yet I used to listen to that Operation Ivy record over and over and over again. I ended up finding, a Op Ivy t-shirt. Loved to rep them. They were on Lookout Records. So you had Tim Lint Armstrong and Matt Freeman. When Operation Ivy broke up, they went on to form Rancid, where they took kind of the formula of Operation Ivy, ska punk, and really took it to the next level. A lot more punk, but still plenty of ska. And Rancid continues to play to this day. And Tim Armstrong in himself has become a coveted songwriter. And he's written, I guess, a ton of stuff for Pink, which makes sense when you listen to some of her music. So kudos to the guys, Tim and Matt, for forming Operation Ivy. So then there's the band that is all bands of like LA all mixed into one with various moving parts and configurations. And it goes like this. You had a band called Hollywood Rose with some guy like Axl Rose and like Izzy Stradlin. I think Steven Adler was in that version. That's 1983. So think about that. Axl and the Boys, 1983, Sunset Strip, LA, rock and rollin'. Then you have LA Guns, which of course formed by Tracy Guns. Axl Rose, Tracy Guns, LA Guns is 1984. The next obvious offshoot of that then became Guns N' Roses, 1985. So then you go down further down the road, And you have a couple of members of Guns N' Roses who form Velvet Revolver. You see the theme there? Hollywood Rose, LA Guns, Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver. So 83, 84, 85, 2002, you get Velvet Revolver, which is also, of course, an offshoot of Stone Temple Pilots. Very interesting to me. It's kind of like that particular group, like the whole LA Guns, Hollywood Rose thing is so interesting because LA Guns never really made it to that like stratospheric level. But they had this like rhythm guitar player, was a lead guitar player, that was kind of putting them back on the map. But I think he got kicked out. I think he was taking too much of the spotlight. A Filipino kid did this killer rendition of Purple Rain. Anyway, you can go find it, LA Guns, Purple Rain. It's killer. It's so good. So then, the next two are bands that break up because the lead singer either quits or there's lead singer syndrome or whatever, substance abuse, whatever it is. But they break up and like 3/4 of the band are like, we still want to go on, but we can't call it this other thing. So the first one is some band called Rage Against the Machine. From 1991 to 2000, all of them have been in other bands, but Rage Against the Machine obviously became kind of, along with Faith No More, like the culprits, if you will, for what is nu metal. And Zack did not want to continue on. But Tom Morello, Brad Wilk, Tim Comerford, we still want to do this. Just so happened that another band was also either on a hiatus or breaking up at that time. And that was Soundgarden. Now, see, Soundgarden isn't the other piece of it because you only have the one guy, right? So you have 3/4 of Rage, who then go get this other guy. And in 2001, they form Audioslave. So yes, a supergroup, if you will, but it really is just Rage Against the Machine with a different singer. So is it really just the same band? I don't know. But you also have Chris Cornell's writing contributions and as a instrumentalist as well. So definitely a different animal. But you got to put their lineage linked. Similarly, a band that either is hated or loved to hate, hate to love. No, I'm not talking about Nickelback. I'm talking about the band before Nickelback that got all the hate. I'm talking about Creed. That's right, Creed. Mark Tremonti, Brian Marshall, Scott Phillips, and of course, Scott Stapp. Scott Stapp had some challenges, difficulties, I believe continues to as well. Has definitely attributed fame being part of the problem. But Creed ran from 1994 to 2004, 10-year run, tons of hits, big concerts, sold-out shows, like moving units. But the band breaks up. Not going to do it anymore. Now, I guess that Brian Marshall was no longer in Creed at that point, but was still friends with Mark Tremonti and Scott Phillips. Hey, we still want to do this. So finding this kid, Miles Kennedy, who'd been singing with Slash. Oh, wait, Slash. Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver, and now Miles Kennedy joins with the other three guys from Creed to form Alter Bridge. Alter Bridge is still going strong. And then Mark Tremonti has another band, a self-titled band, Tremonti, that also plays, that also boasted at one point Wolfgang Van Halen as their bass player. But anyway, Rage Against the Machine, Creed, Alter Bridge, Audioslave, boom, almost bigger. I'm not sure if Alter Bridge has ever sold the units that Creed has, but certainly they've had some big songs and big hits. So then finally, these are more like the honorable mentions, because it's not really multiple members, but it's also kind of impressive to think about legacy. And this is more about two individuals that were founding members of two bands each that are considered like seminal artists, that are considered legendary artists in their genres. So first and foremost, Ian MacKaye, founding member of Minor Threat, principal songwriter, but also just guitar player. Well, Minor Threat really weren't together all that long, couple years. Basically started the whole straight edge movement out of DC. Well, he forms the band Fugazi. And Fugazi has gone on to become like the legends of all legends of independently produced punk rock music. I can't even call them punk rock. I personally love the album End Hits. I think it's amazing. I've mentioned it before. But Ian MacKaye has done it on more than one occasion and has other bands as well. But I mean, Minor Threat and Fugazi, talk about legacy. Can't really beat that. But what about being the guy who co-founds literally one of the earliest punk rock bands, legendary band, Black Flag? I'm, of course, talking about Keith Morris, who also goes on to co-found hardcore legends, the Circle Jerks. So, as you notice, I didn't talk about like replacing like one member, for example, right? It's not like, adding Ronnie Wood to the Rolling Stones, right? From the Faces. It's not about replacing, one member. It's about really starting a whole new band. And I think that's what I wanted to make sure was like the distinction there. But that's all for me this week. I know, not a terribly riveting episode. It's, like I said, it's been a week. It's been a lot. But I wanted to make sure that I recorded this content this week. I've gotten extremely close to a new concept. I'm going to be rolling out for real this time. I'm very, very close. I have some new projects that are in the works, and I'm almost at the point where I can kind of pull the trigger on it. And I think part of it is even more so kind of stimulated by what I've just experienced as a parent. Like, life is too short. You need to get after it. And none of us in Gen X are getting any younger. So what did I miss? What bands where maybe a member died and a whole new band rose up out of it? I'm sure I missed something. There was one that was in the back of my head. I didn't write it down. Man, I can't get it back. How do you let me know? You can email me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on social media at StuckPodX and Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You can head on over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Please like, comment, share, leave 5-star reviews, and most importantly, please subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.